Welcome to the Ghost of Real Estate. I'm your host, Tim Galligan. On this show, episode number 11, we have longtime friend of mine, Phil Vacchio, attorney. Phil, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tim. Very excited to be here. Glad you asked me to come on.
Awesome, man. Thanks for coming. I appreciate it. You want to start off telling us a bit about yourself, how you got started as a real estate elder care attorney, and where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a partner at the Shivers Law Group. We have our main office in Sayville and our satellite office in Garden City, New York. The firm specializes in real estate, estate planning, elder planning, and I also focus practice on guardianships for special needs children and incapacitated adults, and also probate administration when someone passes away and sorting through that process for the family. But what I want to talk to you about today mostly is the estate planning and the asset protection portion.
Okay.
I graduated from Hofstra Law School back in 2012. My partner Valerie Shivers had a sole practice at the time, and I started with her in about 2013. We've grown exponentially since then. Became partner with her, and like I said, we have to focus our practice on the estate planning and the elder law asset protection Medicaid realm. And I thought it might be good for everybody watching and your clients to kind of discuss some of that, and so people understand education in this realm is key, because most people think, hey, I live on Long Island, I own a house, I have some money, I can never qualify for Medicaid. If I get older, I get sick, I'm going to have to just spend all my money, and whatever happens, happens.
Let's start with this. What is Medicaid? What is
Right.
Medicare? What is Medicaid? What are all these?
Right, very confusing. I have no idea why the government chose two similar names like that, Medicare, Medicaid. I get that question all the time. But Medicare is a non-eligibility based program that individuals get automatically upon age or disability. So
everyone gets it.
everyone gets it if they fall into those two categories.
Okay.
If I'm over 65 or over, I get it automatically.
Medicare.
Okay, Medicare. I can sign up for Medicare. I'm entitled to it. I've paid into it from my work my whole life.
Okay. What is that, like health coverage or like doctor visits, medicine?
It's your general health insurance,
Okay.
hospital visits, doctor visits,
Got it.
some prescription based sometimes, depending on the plan you have. A lot of people will have a supplemental with Medicare to cover things that it doesn't.
Right.
That
Like
you
someone
private
has a
pay for
pension
that.
or a coverage from their company that they work for, or something like that.
Right. I'm a retired teacher. I'm a retired police officer, and
Right.
I have this insurance through them that kind of supplements what
Okay.
Medicare doesn't cover. Or you can get it based on disability. If you're under 65 and you're declared legally disabled, for whatever the case may be,
Right.
you will also get Medicare benefits. All right, but
Got
so
it.
that's not, I can have $1 million, I own 3 properties, and still get Medicare. That's
Right.
automatic. It's not eligibility based.
Okay.
Medicaid is another government-based health insurance program that is eligibility-based, right? So I have to qualify for that. So it's based on my assets and my income.
Right.
Most of what I deal with is long-term care Medicaid. So there's Medicaid for younger individuals if they're below the poverty level and they only have a certain amount of income or assets. But as you get older, what you're more concerned about is if I get sick. If I get sick one day, especially on Long Island, and I need to go into either a skilled nursing facility, which is the highest level of care you can receive, or some kind of lower care like an assisted living or care in the home, like aides coming into the house to help care for you. If I don't do anything, I have to pay privately for that.
And Medicare doesn't cover that.
Medicare only covers a very limited amount of
Okay.
long-term care days.
Got
So
it.
if I did go into a rehab or nursing facility, Medicare could cover the first 20 days I'm there in full, and they cover days 21 up to day 100 if I'm making progress, if I'm not plateauing in my health. They'll cover 80% of that. And if I have a supplemental policy, a lot of times the supplemental policy will cover that other 20% of
Right.
copay. But that's not always, you don't always reach that full 100 day. But let's say you do get the full 100 days, Medicare now cuts off completely and you're completely private pay at that point. And on Long Island, I would say the average.
$5,000 a day.
Yeah, right. It's like 15 to 20,000 plus per month.
Right.
So you can imagine, I'm there for a year, I'm already, $150,000
Right.
in the hole. So even if I have substantial assets, that's going to dwindle very quickly. And most people I talk to say, I worked my entire life for those assets.
Right.
I don't want them now to go to pay for this nursing home at this exorbitant rate or to pay to the government. I'd rather it go to my children, my heirs one day.
Right. So now how does that work, to rewind there? So
Mm-hmm.
if I go in, I don't have Medicaid, I have Medicare, I don't necessarily have the cash funds on hand to pay $20,000 a month. I get my first 20 days covered, but I'm there for a year. It costs me $150. Do they tie into my assets?
So what happens is, as soon as that Medicare coverage period ends, the nursing home facility is going to be after you and your family to say, how are we getting paid now? And they'll want to see all your assets, see transcripts, statements rather, of your assets to see either I have substantial assets that I'm going to be private paying, or I need to apply for Medicaid.
Right.
And a lot of times people don't do planning ahead of time to lower their assets to make themselves Medicaid eligible. So say we're at that point, I'm in a nursing home facility, and I still have substantial assets. I own my home, and let's just say I have $100,000 in the bank. Right. So there are some exceptions, and I won't go too deep into that because that gets very complicated. But for example, my primary residence, if I state to the government that I have an intent to return home if I get better, they won't count my house, my primary residence, as an asset. But all my other assets, putting aside retirement accounts like IRAs, those are treated differently. I'll get to that in a moment. But all other assets like regular bank accounts, CDs, brokerage accounts, whole life policies that have a cash value, all those count as assets. And if my assets are over, as of 2021, $15,850, I'm not eligible, right? So say I did none of this planning, and like I said, I have a house, and I have $100,000 in the bank. Those are my assets.
Right.
If I do nothing, I have to spend that $100,000, pay it to the nursing home, and once it's below that Medicaid asset limit, $15,000 or so, then I can apply for Medicaid. But now all that money's gone. I spent it. Alternatively, I can meet with an elder law attorney like myself and see, are there ways that I can protect some of that money? Sometimes there are exceptions that apply. So if I can transfer some of that money to a spouse, if I have a spouse that's not sick and not in a nursing home, I can transfer the money to that spouse and protect it. Or if I have a disabled child who's legally disabled, I can make a transfer to that child and they won't penalize me for that. But there are very few exceptions, and there's something called a 5-year look-back period for nursing home Medicaid.
Okay.
So if I want nursing home Medicaid to start picking up my nursing home bill as of September 1st, 2021, and I apply, the Department of Social Services, which is the municipality in Nassau and Suffolk that processes Medicaid applications, they're going to require me to give statements of all my financial accounts that I've owned in the past 5 years.
Right.
Statements for every month. And they're going to look through them and they're going to look, did I give money away? Did I make uncompensated transfers that I didn't get something of equal value back in return for? So they can't penalize me for spending my own money. If I say,
Right.
oh, 2 years ago, I spent $20,000 to renovate my kitchen, here are my copies of my invoices, here are the check copies, that's acceptable. They can't penalize me for that. But let's say 2 years ago, I gifted my son $30,000 to pay off his car loan, right? That's an uncompensated transfer, and they're going to say, well, that's not allowed. And because of that transfer that was in the past 5 years, we're going to penalize you, and we're going to say Medicaid's not going to cover you for a certain amount of time because of that transfer. So that's what they're looking for in that 5-year look back. So, you know, it's my job as an attorney, if someone comes to me to do the Medicaid application, to minimize those transfers if those exist, and to find other ways to protect what's left.
Right.
There's the one thing I want everyone to take away from this is there's always, almost always a way to get Medicaid and protect at least a portion of your assets. You know, sometimes if I have millions and millions of dollars and my income is so high that my income alone pays the nursing home bill, it might not make sense. But for the average person on Long Island or in the 5 boroughs, that's not the case, right? So I can do certain things to preserve some of those assets so that they go to my heirs one day. There's something that we use quite often as advanced planning called a Medicaid Asset Protection Trust. So it's a form of a trust. Let me step back for a second. A trust is a legal entity that can own assets, the same as you or me, or like say you created an LLC to own an investment property, right? So it's a legally recognized entity, and I can transfer assets to it. And there's many different kinds of trusts for different purposes. But the one I'm referring to now is an irrevocable trust called the Medicaid Asset Protection Trust. So I'm going to, again, use a primary residence as an example. You know, you in the real estate field, you know that on Long Island, your primary residence a lot of times is your most significant asset or one of your most significant assets. So even if we could protect that's worth doing that advanced planning.
Right.
So a client comes to me, let's say they're 65 or older. 65 is kind of the age that I tell my clients to start thinking about this kind of planning because of that 5-year look back. So what I would say to them is, hey, So you own this house, you guys, you and your wife, you and your spouse live there, and you have these other assets. What is your plan with the house? Do you plan on staying in the house? Do you plan on selling it and using the money to rent somewhere? And I would probably advise the individuals to transfer that property, that primary residence, into this irrevocable trust.
Got it.
Once it's in the irrevocable trust, that 5-year clock starts ticking. If it's in that irrevocable trust for at least 5 years before that person requires nursing home care,
Right, then you're good.
they can never come after it. They can't put a lien against it. They can't force the sale of it. While I'm alive, through that trust, I maintain the rights of what's called a life tenant. So I can live in that house as long as I want, rent-free.
Right.
Nobody can sell it without my permission. If I get property tax exemptions like STAR or Enhanced STAR or a veteran exemption, I'm still entitled to those.
Okay.
The trust, though, is the owner on the deed, and I can't be my own trustee. Me or my spouse can't be my own trustee. It's going to be one of my kids or a friend or a family member that I trust to act in that role.
Got it.
And a trustee is kind of like an executor, if you will, of a will. Right. They're managing the trust assets. And so if I'm living in that house, I'm not going to see any change in my life at all. The two biggest negatives, though, once you transfer real property to that kind of trust, I can no longer take out loans against the property. I can't refinance.
Really?
I can't get a home equity loan. So I'm kind of locking it up for equity purposes.
Right.
There are some cases where I can get a reverse mortgage. That might still be an option. But really, you're planning on locking up that asset for equity purposes.
Right.
Let's say 2 years down the road, I want to sell the house. Right. So my trustee, I'm just going to use an example again, an easy example. Let's say I have a son, my son's my trustee. And I say, I want to sell my house, I want to move. My son's the trustee. I say, you got to sign off on this. Because he's the trustee, so he has to sign off as well as I do. If he disagrees for some reason, I do have the right to change my trustees, or I can change my beneficiaries. So I said to him, hey, listen, buddy, do what I say, or I'm writing you out. You're not going to inherit anything. And usually that's a pretty good impetus to agree. But say, all right, they sign it off, they sell that property. The proceeds of the sale are payable to my trust, not to me, because the trust is the owner.
Correct.
Okay?
Right.
The trustee would open up a trust bank account or other financial account to deposit that money into. Mm-hmm. Now it's a liquid asset.
Right.
Right. So in an irrevocable trust, liquid assets can't be used for me, and I can't access them without potentially voiding the trust, the principal. I do have the right, though, to instruct the trustee to buy me somewhere else to live. So I sell my house for $500,000. I say I want to buy this smaller house, or I want to buy this condo for $300,000.
Right.
The trustee has to listen to me. They use the money. The trust buys that new residence, and now I have all those rights as a life tenant again to that new residence. I'll always have a place to live.
Got it.
But in that example, I sold for $500. I bought for $300. I have $200,000 left over. That $200,000 in the trust is protected, but it's not accessible to me.
Right.
Right. So when I do this, I always make it very clear to my clients: you're protecting these assets, but you are giving up some of your access and flexibility in how to use those assets.
Right.
And that's why a lot of times I don't recommend transferring other liquid accounts to that kind of trust. Bank accounts, brokerage accounts.
Because you can't access it.
Because I can't access it. If I have a client that says I have a lot of money and I will never access this account, it's for my kids, then maybe we put that into the irrevocable trust because they've already, in their minds, it's not theirs anymore, it's for their kids. So we put that into the trust, and again, it's all about being in that trust for the requisite amount of time before you need that care, if you ever do. I mean, no one ever wants to go to a nursing home, obviously. But people nowadays live a lot longer than they used to. I have so many clients that are over the age of 100, and at some point in life when you're that old, yeah, you're going to require some kind of care. Right. And sometimes, as much as your family wants to keep you home, you can't get the care you need in the house. You need that skilled nursing care. So it's it's not an option. So we want to plan so that some of those assets are protected if that does happen. Now that I was referring to was all nursing home Medicaid, the whole 5-year look back and all of that.
So there's no way if you have, let's say you have $1 million in cash and you have 17 homes. Mm-hmm. Right? Those 17 homes you could put into the trust, all 17 of them. But the $1 million you can't.
If you want to use it.
If you want to use it.
Yeah.
To go to the grocery store, for example.
For whatever. If it's used for your benefit, if the trust is written in a way that it gives access to the principal of the trust assets for the benefit of what's called the trust grantor or the creator, in the government's eyes, they say, okay, the trust allows it to be accessed for your benefit, use it. You have to use it. So it has to be written in a way that the government sees, oh, these assets are not accessible by the trust creator or for the trust creator, and so that's why we're not going to count them as assets for that person.
So then how do you make sure that you never have more than $15,850 in cash?
You cannot. You cannot. It's a balancing act. So
Because at that point, even if I had a million homes in a trust, if I have $16,000, I get declined for Medicaid.
yeah, but you're going to live like a pauper then, right? Like, who wants to work their whole life and not enjoy their money?
Right, but if the 16, but as soon as they see the 16,000, bang, you're declined.
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
That's the limit. So there's things we can do to spend money down at the last minute,
Got it,
and other kind of plannings we can do to protect a portion of those assets. But you don't want to be significantly over that 15,000 if it's possible.
Got it. Okay.
But then again, if I have a client that has, a few $1 million, they may say, listen, I want to live how I want to live.
Right.
I don't want my assets restricted. If I want to sell my house and use it to go travel the world, I want to do that. Then they don't do the trust. It doesn't make sense for everybody, but the average household where I worked my whole life, my house is my most significant asset, I want to preserve it for my kids, the trust a lot of times makes a lot of sense.
Right.
All right, so it's a balancing act. I want to live comfortably in the life I'm accustomed to, and as I get older, I always tell my clients, one thing you should do is enjoy your money, because what was the point of it all otherwise?
Right.
So we have this pot that we leave in your name, that you have access to, that you used to live off of, and we're not protecting that pot. But then we have these other assets that we're protecting.
Right.
So it's a balancing act.
Right.
Protecting assets for my family versus still enjoying my life.
Got it.
And every single person is different. There's no one size fits all, estate plan, trust plan that works for everybody.
Right.
So, when we sit down with a client, I have to talk to them about, first go through their assets, go through their family situation, go through their goals, what's important to you,
Right.
what's your plan in the next 5 years to 10 years. And we talk about all of that and figure out whether or not this particular plan makes sense for you or something else. And then real quickly, just with the whole nursing home Medicaid, there's also something called community Medicaid, which is a lower level of care, which would be like if I am living in my home still, but I need aides to come care for me, or I'm going into an assisted living, which is a lower level of care than a nursing home, but higher than living at home.
Right.
There are a few assisted livings on Long Island that accept Medicaid. Most don't. Most are private pay. But that kind of Medicaid that pays for that is
So
called
not everyone
community.
accepts it.
Yeah, I would say the majority of the assisted livings on Long Island do not accept Medicaid.
Really?
Yeah, they're mostly private pay. But there are a handful that do. There may be more that pop up. Or we look at the home care. I still live in my house, or I live in an apartment, and I get the aides to come in. That's community Medicaid, and there's different rules to an extent. Up to now, there's been no look back. So the whole 5-year look back for nursing homes, there was no look back at all for community Medicaid. So you came to me, I could transfer all of your assets today, and you'd be eligible next month.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was always, there wasn't much advanced planning that needed to be done in that realm, because I could do it at the last second. Back in 2020, they announced that as of October 2020, they were going to institute a 2.5-year look back for community Medicaid. But because of COVID and the pandemic, that kept getting pushed back. So as it stands now, that 2.5-year look back period is supposed to start on January 1st, 2022. So
Gotcha.
January coming up. So right now, if you came to me and your parents needed that community Medicaid, we can still transfer all your assets, get them below the eligibility limit, and apply for Medicaid. That'd be fine.
Right.
Once 2022 hits, we can't do that anymore. So there's that 2.5-year look back. That's when that advanced planning becomes important again.
Right.
I want to have some of the assets in that trust for at least 2.5 years before I can get that kind of care. And I'm using trust as one example because that's probably the most common asset protection tool that we use. But sometimes I'll recommend, transfers to children into an account that the children are owners of, and let the money sit there. Transfers between spouses, things like that. It depends on the situation.
Right.
Again, everyone's different, but that's kind of a general overview of it.
Nice.
And then estate planning in general, I would say most people, when they hear estate planning, I don't know what you think, but most people think, hey, that's for the super wealthy. I don't have that much money. I have a house and I have some money. Why do I need to do estate planning?
Right.
And that couldn't be further from the truth. Even if you're not, I would say at the first point in your life, when you're young, you're in your 20s, maybe you just got a job, maybe you bought a house, you had your first child.
Right.
Having your first child is a really important moment in your life where you should have an estate plan in place, even if it's just a will, because your will gives you a chance to say, if I die, and if my spouse is not around, who's going to be the guardian of my kids till they're 18?
Right.
If I don't have that in place,
It's
that
free for all.
crazy brother you have that you would never leave your kids with for a day could come forward, and try to
Right.
become guardian, right?
Right.
And you want to prevent that and have who you want in that position. So you can name who's the guardian, you can name a trustee for whatever money you're leaving your kids. You know, you could say, for instance, if I pass away and I'm leaving my kids money and they're under the age of 25, for example, I don't want them to have control of their share until they turn 25.
Right.
And until they reach that age, this is who I want to manage it for them. And they would go to that person if they need money for, you know, school or health, whatever the case may be. So they're not going out and buying a Lambo and,
Right.
you know, partying it up and wasting all the assets.
Right.
So that's your chance to put all that in place. It's all the God forbid stuff. Like, no one wants to think about these things, but they're very important because if you watch the news every day, things happen to good people, young people, older people
Right.
all the time. So
No, for sure.
it's, you know, why do you get life insurance, right? You get life insurance if I die and I want to leave my family with all this debt, I want them to be able to be comfortable.
Right.
It's the same thing with estate planning. If, you know, there's dying on the one hand, I want to make sure everything is laid out, but there's also what if I'm alive, but I become incapacitated,
Right.
right? I'm in an accident and I'm in a coma. Who's going to make my health decisions for me? Who has the legal authorization to handle my insurances, apply for government benefits, access my accounts to pay my bills?
Yeah.
Just if you're married, it doesn't give you carte blanche power over each other.
Doesn't.
There's not. There are a lot of situations. I'll give you one example, right? I went to call Verizon the other day for my cell phone, and I didn't realize my wife is the authorized user on the
Yeah.
account. I'm
Yeah.
not the authorized
Yeah, yeah,
user,
yeah.
so they wouldn't even speak to me.
Yeah,
I'm like,
it's
that's my
crazy.
wife, I'm on the account. So, and there's things like that. There's government benefit programs, you know, Social Security, dealing with the IRS. You can't necessarily just sign your spouse's name or do things for them. So you want to make sure you have those documents, power of attorney, healthcare proxy, will, living will in place to put those, give those people that you would trust to
Right.
handle your affairs the legal authorization to do what's necessary if something terrible does happen. And then, you know, with the power of attorney especially, I'll circle back around to that Medicaid planning. That's so important to me, the power of attorney. If it's not done correctly and doesn't give the person you're giving power to enough power and the right powers, if you get sick and you're going into a facility and it's not done correctly, my hands are tied. I may not be able to do the necessary planning to protect some of your assets, and then we either say, hey, listen,
Right.
you're going to have to pay for the nursing home privately, or we can try to go to court to have you appointed as a legal guardian. That's not something you want to go through if you don't have to. It's very expensive, a lot of legal fees, a lot of court fees, having to go to a hearing in court, having to report to the court annually, take training courses.
Yeah, pain in the ass.
All of that could be avoided
Yeah.
by seeing an attorney and getting a power of attorney and the healthcare proxy in place. So it's really important that everybody, every adult person should have those documents. You know, you might not do them and you might get by and you might be 70 years old, nothing ever happened,
Right.
right? And well, I didn't need them, but
Or
what
you
if
might not.
something does happen,
Right.
right? That's what you're planning for.
So now, if you have, whether it be community or regular Medicaid,
Well, community Medicaid and nursing home, chronic care Medicaid is nursing
Okay.
home Medicaid. Those are
That's fine.
long-term Medicaid programs.
Okay.
Regular Medicaid would be for someone who's under the age of 65 and not disabled, and they're just very low income. I don't deal much with that.
okay,
But
so there is that type as well.
There is that type as well. If I'm completely destitute, I have no income, I can get regular government benefits. Because remember, I only get Medicare if I'm legally disabled or over the age of 65.
Right.
What if I'm neither of those and I lost my job, I have no
Right.
income at all? Medicaid might be able to pay for my regular health care, hospital, doctors, and those
Got it.
things. Yeah.
Okay, so if I go into a nursing home, I don't qualify for Medicaid, right? And they're taking I'm not protected on my assets. Now they start taking, how do they take from the home? Like, at what point does it run out? If I have $500,000 in equity in the home, to make math easy, say it's $500,000 a year for the nursing home. After year one, I'm done.
You're talking about if you have your house as your asset?
Yeah.
So the nursing home, they don't take from you. They bill you, right? So if you're not paying that bill's accruing, they're going to sue you. They're going to sue members
Right.
of your family who are supposed to be your personal legal representatives. They may not be successful with that, but nursing homes, assisted living homes, they're a business. If they're not getting paid, they're going
Right.
to take action. So it's not really a matter of them taking from you, it's you not being able to get the care that you need. So let's say either you private pay or you're out of here. We're going to put you back into a hospital and then not take you back, right?
Right.
So you need to plan that there's a pay source if you need that kind of care. Whether it's, I planned ahead of time, I did the trust and some of my assets are protected and I understand there are some assets that are not protected that I will have to use.
Right.
But even in that scenario, there is always a way to protect a portion of the assets at the 11th hour. Say I'm going into a nursing home tomorrow, and I have, again, I'll use $100,000 as an example. I have $100,000 in my name. I'm going into a nursing home tomorrow. None of the exceptions apply, meaning I don't have a well spouse that I can transfer money to. I don't have a disabled child I can transfer money to. So there's none of those exceptions. I can still protect about half of my assets using a technique of gifting and loaning, typically to kids, but it doesn't have to be to kids.
Right.
So in that example, for using that example, take the $100,000, half of it, $50,000, I gift to one of my kids. They put it into an account that's in their name only, that's not mixed with their own assets. The other $50,000, I would loan to them, and we would do a promissory note memorializing that loan. Now the Medicaid would penalize me for that $50,000 gift. They would say, you made this $50,000 gift, it's within the 5-year look back, and that's going to create a penalty period, but we're not going to pay for your nursing home. So let's say in that scenario, it's a 4-month penalty period.
Right.
When we structure the loan and the payback as the attorneys, we're going to make sure that the payback period syncs up with the anticipated penalty period. So the loan's going to say it gets paid back over 4 months, once a month over 4 months. And the loan plus that person's income is going to pay the nursing home bill for those months, for those 4 months during the penalty period. Now the penalty period ends, Medicaid kicks in and starts paying, right. And that other half, that gifted half, is now protected. So I still protected half your money, even though we couldn't beat that 5-year look back.
Right.
So there's almost always a way to protect at least a portion of the assets, no matter where you are in the process.
Interesting.
The best case scenario, though, is to do that advanced planning, right? That's
right.
You can protect the most assets that way if you plan ahead and do what's necessary. But even in that case, like I was saying before, you plan that balancing act. So I have all these assets protected, but when I do go into a nursing home, I may still have some assets, and I can do that other planning to protect a portion of those as well.
Right.
So there's always things we can do. It's, again, there's no one size that fits all. Every situation is very different. If one of those exceptions apply, great. One of the things that families can do, and I did this recently to an extreme degree, you can prepay your funeral, right? So I'm going into a nursing home. When I die one day, my funeral's gonna have to be paid some way or another, and funerals are expensive around here. You can
right.
easily spend $15,000 plus on my funeral, my casket, my arrangements, all that stuff. Yeah, it's nuts. It's a crazy business. But if I have that $100,000, Medicaid would allow me to spend some of that $15,000 on my. It's called an irrevocable prepaid funeral agreement. I pick out all my stuff, a little morbid, but I pick it all out. I pay for it. I show
shopping?
Medicaid. Yeah, you go to funeral home shopping, right? It's a fun day at the funeral home.
Yeah.
But it allows you to do that. Medicaid sees that you spent your money on that, and they allow that. But I can also prepay funerals for my children and my children's spouses. So recently I had a client that had like $150,000 maybe of going into a nursing home, and they prepaid funerals for the person's 6 children, and their 6 spouses. They spent like $120,000
wow.
on paying these individuals' funeral arrangements, and now that money didn't have to go to Medicaid and the nursing home, and Medicaid picked up, and those individuals' families never have to worry about the funeral when that day comes because it's already paid for.
They actually pay the funeral home?
Yeah. So you pay the funeral home.
Got some great cash flow, huh?
Well, it's put into like an escrow account that they can't access. It's solely for that purpose. I'm sure they may get the interest or whatnot on it because it's a business, but it has to be an irrevocable agreement that we show it to Medicaid, and they see it's an irrevocable agreement with the funeral home. That money's there reserved, and it's all those things are paid for already. So, and that's just one example. There are other exemptions that apply, but you won't know what those are until the situation happens.
Right.
So the best thing to do, advance plan as much as you can, protect your house, protect some of your assets as long as it makes sense for you. And then whatever's left at the end, we do what we can to protect what is there if that unfortunate situation ever arises. Hey, listen, if you never need a nursing home, awesome. Maybe you live to your 100 in complete health and die in your sleep. That's the ideal way to go, right? But that, unfortunately doesn't happen for everybody. So planning is really important.
Nice. So what would you recommend people out there as far as planning for asset protection, as far as elder care planning? What age should you start looking into? I know you said asset protection could be kind of later on, but as far as the elder care portion of it, protecting everything.
Yeah, and I'm using a lot of generalities because again, everyone's different. But age 65 or so is normally when I tell my clients to start thinking about that kind of planning. At least see an elder law attorney like myself for a consult and discuss the situation and decide, hey, maybe it makes sense for me right now, or maybe it doesn't. Maybe I want to wait a few years and revisit it at that point. When I'm younger, a lot of times a basic estate plan is sufficient, just a will, a power of attorney, a healthcare proxy, and a living will. But like I said before, every adult person really should have at least that in place. But there are situations where other kind of trusts come into play. Probate is the process of having to present a will to court when someone passes away. So a lot of people think I have a will, it says what I want, it's automatic. It's not automatic.
Right.
The court has to approve of it, so your executor has to hire an attorney, file it with the court. And where it could become complicated is your interested parties are not necessarily who's listed in your will. Let's say you have 6 kids and I'm disinheriting one child. We had a falling out, I don't want that one child to get everything, and I disinherit them in the will. When I die and my family goes to probate my will, the court is still going to require us to serve that one child who was disinherited with a citation. And it gives that child a chance to contest.
Really?
Yeah, and contesting is easy, not to win it, but to stall the process. They can just show up in court or have an attorney show up for them and say we're contesting, and it puts a monkey wrench in the process, and it could force a buyout. You know, it could just force your family to say, hey, go away, take $50,000 and just leave us alone. So if that's the case, you may want to plan to avoid probate. And again, certain kind of trusts where there might not be asset protection because you don't want to give up control, but we could plan to avoid probate for all your assets so that when I die, everything passes automatically as a matter of law and doesn't have to go to court. Or if I own properties in different states, say you own a property here in New York and then Florida and then North Carolina, if they're all in my name when I die, my family will have to do a probate in New York first, where I lived. Then they'll have to do a second probate in Florida and a third probate in North Carolina.
Oh, wow.
Because New York doesn't have jurisdiction over the real estate owned in those other states. So if I see my family's going to have to hire 3 different attorneys, go to 3 different courts, maybe I say, let me just do some planning now, put these assets into some kind of trust so that they pass automatically and they don't have to go to court. So, you know, there's so many kinds of trusts. What I focused on was the Medicaid asset protection type trusts, but there are other situations where people may want a different kind of trust to make, it's all about making things easier for your family, to be honest with you, right? Because you don't want to leave people with a mess. Something happens to you, you don't want your loved ones to have a mess on their hands and to be in financial disarray. You want them to be set up and you want things to be as easy as possible. And that's what it's all about, really.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So for anyone who's listening, any clients that we have who could use your services, how can they reach you? Phone number or email, website, Instagram?
Absolutely. So again, a partner at the Shivers Law Group. Our main address is 140 Lakeland Avenue in Sayville, New York, 11782. Office phone number is 631-569-4334. And my email, if you want to reach me directly, is pvacchio, P as in Peter, V as in Victor, A, C as in Charlie, C as in Charlie, HIO at shiverslg.com.
Awesome.
So, yeah, anyone who's listening and who wants to reach out to me, we also give free consultations. So even if you want to just look at your situation and get an opinion and then make a decision afterwards whether or not it makes sense to you, there's no cost for that. So, you know, feel free to reach out to me for any of those types of matters.
Dude, thanks for coming on the show, man.
Yeah, man, thanks for having me.
Cool.